Good evening. It's really a pleasure to be here in Kansas City, and in particular the hackerspace folks. I really appreciate you coming out. You guys know all of this, so it might be a little bit boring, but I'll say that you might pay attention anyway, because I'd like you to be able to give my story to other people, and give the Maker Faire story to more people here in Kansas City, and really spreading the word is key. So Maker Faire, just before I start, in 2010 we did 3 major fairs in Bay Area. Bay Area was our 5th annual fair. We did Detroit for the first time, and we did New York for the first time. And I did Detroit. New York's kind of obvious. We have a lot of people there that are making. Detroit was different. It was a challenge. It was, can we do a Maker Faire in a place that probably culturally, in terms of creative capital, is at the opposite end of the spectrum from say the Bay Area? A place that's disconnected instead of connected. Is it a place where people are discouraged instead of optimistic? And what would it mean to bring a Maker Faire to Detroit? And we began a process similar to this, of meeting with people, getting the community to come out and talk to each other, meet each other. And we pulled off at the Henry Ford Museum a wonderful event. We had about 18 to 20,000 people over 2 days, about 325 makers. And you know, the best part of it is, in a way, we connected them to their roots. In a sense, Henry Ford was a maker, you know? And he wasn't a maker just because he had a thing to do about cars. He was a maker because he was in a community of makers of cars. And he had a vision of what he wanted to do with cars, which is not unlike the visions we have about the technology in our lives, that it appeals to everybody. It's transformative to the very culture and society we live in. So I'm going to just ramble through a little of this, but I just want to say that coming here today and talking to the Union Station folks, this is a beautiful venue. I'm blown away. It's just incredible. I can kind of imagine it in my head, and yet at the same time I got to step back and say, well, practically, how do we do this? But it's a really nice venue for a Maker Faire. We're exploring how to do this here, I think, on a different model. There's only so many Maker Fairs that I can produce under the current structures, just the amount of time in the year. We've been, just like Vince and others here have started a mini Maker Faire. We have maybe a dozen of those going on in addition to the small area. But I mean, just today I got a question of people from Finland, Atlanta, Georgia Tech, you know, people asking, I want to do a Maker Faire. And we have to figure out how to do it, because it needs to be everywhere. So, for those of you that aren't familiar, who are makers? Well, they're all these kinds of people. And particularly, I think the word has become a way to connect lots of people who also see themselves in a different sense, in a more specific sense. But Maker Faire can bring those folks together to share what they do. But the most important thing, I think, is that all of us are makers. Not just a few of us, not just the hackers in the room, not just a couple of people in Kansas City. Everybody here is a maker. And they may not know it yet. We may not have kind of convinced them, but we've got to keep thinking that way. And I think if you go to Maker Faire, you come away convinced that you are a maker and you have the potential to do a lot more. So I found this quote about invention, because Maker Faire is sometimes called like a kind of invention fair. And I don't actually like the word, because I think people often don't see themselves as inventors the way they see themselves as makers. But I thought this is pretty profound, and I think you could say this is true of inventors or entrepreneurs or artists. They establish relationships that did not previously exist. And those could be relationships between ideas, could be relationships between things, different things, and between people. And I think perhaps the most important thing that Maker Faire does is to establish those relationships among makers of very different kinds that didn't exist in the community. It's my experience that we'll have meetings like this, and people will begin to socialize afterwards, and they find they live a couple blocks from each other, and yet they have the same interest and they have similar goals, and then they begin connecting together. It probably happens also in the hackerspaces of people just wandering in, looking for a home for something they're very passionate about. So Maker Faire and Make, comprise all kinds of things. I like to say from fabrics to fabrication. And yet there's a certain attitude to it. And who's going to embroider Hello Sucker? I mean, it's not just what you normally do, or the programming basic statement of writing Hello World. Well, that's a 3D printed object, a globe. So a really new take on this. So Maker Faire grows out of Make magazine, which I started, and it's in its 7th year. And in some ways, it was a reinvention of popular mechanics. The idea of, but reinventing it almost for a hacker mentality that we'd see in software, and thinking that the world around us could be hacked, and people were enjoying that. That the future applications weren't going to be just on a computer, they're going to be in the world around us, and they would be physical. And we have things like robots, and we have music, and we want to hack all of those things. We want to hack the world around us. And the Maker Faire has taken place in the Bay Area. As I said, it's not a particularly good image, but I think the thing that you would be surprised by in Maker Faire, if you watch the videos and stuff, is actually how large it is. We have, this year, I think it was over 750 makers. We had about 70,000 people over 2 days. It is filled to capacity. But the experience is overwhelming almost, because you're meeting people who are passionate, they're inspired by what they do, and they love to talk about it. And where else do you get that? I mean, it's one thing to see an object, it's one thing to see a piece of art or an invention, but to be able to talk to that person and ask them questions like, hey, where'd you get that idea? Where'd you get those materials? And is this the first version of this project, or have you been working on it for a while? And we can talk about all kinds of things that way, and as I said, it's a lot of fun. Well, this is a video that I'll let you watch just to give you, those of you who aren't familiar with Maker Faire. So that gives you some idea if you haven't seen a Maker Faire before. It's a lot of different things that are brought together. I like to think of it as a bunch of stuff that you wouldn't see together in one place. The most important thing, though, is it comes from the community. It's not necessarily really from corporations or from people that are doing this in research labs. These are people who are doing it in their backyards, in their basements, in their garages. They're doing it because they love to do it. And out of the magazine, I just was meeting these really interesting people, and I said, gosh, they're so much fun to see what they do and talk to them about what they do. How do I get that experience for other people? And just as the mini Maker Faire does, it still works with 20 makers or 30 makers. It's still fun to get that group of people together. But there's something, I think, at another scale when we can imagine, what if you brought all of Kansas City together? What if you really got everybody there, not just people that do electronics, but you got the crafters there, you got food makers there, you got rocket people there, you got scientists there, and at the end, you've brought all these different people together to share what they love. And again, just to give you something that, there we go, something to, just sort of say, what is Maker Faire? Well, I think I'm really trying to bring together, almost reinventing a fair. So it's not about agricultural products. It's really about the creative and technical projects that people are doing. It's not pigs and pies, it's robots and rockets and other things like that. And I want to celebrate what we can do, what we can make, what we do together. And I think it's much more powerful and much more important than even the things that we're making. This feeling, this sense that we have that we can do things, we can make things, as you saw in my opening slide. The future is in your hands. You can make a difference. And finally, really for kids, I'm just so delighted and surprised by how many kids, how many families come to this event, and kids just get it like this. They engaged right away, and they want to do stuff. It's what they don't get in school. They're given textbooks, they're given lectures, they want to do stuff. They want to interact with the world around them. And just to give you the kind of, just some examples of how just something like a bicycle, an ordinary bicycle, can be really transformed into a vehicle of personal expression. This is the scraper bikes from Oakland. And this young man actually goes around the fair with about 12 guys on bikes. And they had the idea that they wanted to trick out bikes the way people trick out cars. They wanted to be proud of the way the bikes looked, how they moved. And you can't see it particularly well, but it's a particularly tall bike. There's another form. Someone else figuring out, let's put LED lights into the wheels of bicycles. One hand, they're a little bit more visible at night when you're riding like this way, but it's also fun. It's a lot better than baseball cards. Look at this. If you can see, those are sneakers in place of tires. This is a pretty functional bike that turns a washing machine. It's in the current issue of Make. He calls it Bike-O Washer. And this has nothing to do with bikes, but I have to show the preliminary, the electric muffins. And part of what happens bringing all this together, people are having fun. They're doing it because they enjoy it and they want to share it with other people. So, and kind of wrapping up is, that what's important to me about this thing we often call DIY or do it yourself, it's that you can learn to do anything. Once you start playing with a 3D printer, once you start playing with an Arduino, once you start working with these things, they're not hard anymore. It doesn't mean you're going to be expert, but it means you can do something with them. And that's kind of the guiding ethos behind Maker Faire. It also creates opportunity, partially because it also creates community. It builds connections between people. But when you begin to do something, you discover something about yourself and you discover other people who share those same interests. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, this is a current cartoon. It's a how-to cartoon, our current issue. You know, why I believe this is important isn't just to benefit us or the people in this room, but you probably can't read. He says, he says, I know the future is what I make it. I believe I can make the world better. I understand I need knowledge and passion. I choose to participate, not observe. I work with my hands and my mind. I pursue beauty in what I produce. I see art in science and science in art. I value skills. I am the next generation maker. That's what we're trying to create. Thank you very much.